Let's talk about Christina Formella, the married teacher from Downers Grove, Illinois, who's facing 55 felonies for allegedly essaying a child. I was able to get the transcript from her June 17th hearing, which is the one where the prosecutor dished out all of that tea. Now, I attended all of her hearings in person, so of course I was at this one. And there were also two journalists from Chicago, but in their articles, they could only talk about the new charges or the indictment and what could happen to her as far as a punishment if she's convicted. They didn't talk about all of the stuff the prosecutor said regarding the details of what Christina allegedly did. But since I'm not an actual journalist, I was able to come on here and tell you guys what I heard that day. Unfortunately, a few weeks ago, somebody messaged me accusing me of lying, pretty much said I just made it all up, which is absolutely insane because I'm sure that would be a huge defamation or slander case coming my way if that was the case, but I got a receipt anyway. So I have a 56-page transcript from that day. I'm going to go over a little bit with you and you can see it for yourself. You can know exactly what the prosecutor said. And even though I've talked about a lot of this in previous videos, I'm going to say hold on tight because this is awful. And don't forget, her husband Michael was there that day. He knows all of this and he still stays with her and supports her. Now, at this hearing, the prosecutor was basically explaining to the judge why the state believes Christina should be detained before a trial, if it even goes that far. They talk about the Illinois Safety Act, which is a three-pronged criteria required to detain somebody as they await their trial. And the state was explaining how Christina has met each one of those prongs. I'm going to start down here. I'm going to read it off of my laptop and you can follow along. The next prong is whether the defendant poses a real and present threat. And we believe that this prong has been met as well. The defense did file a response, and its response seems to ignore the fact that at the initial detention hearing, which was on March 17th of 2025, Judge Deedon did find that this defendant did pose a danger to the victim in this case. And that was when it was believed that this was an isolated incident back in December of 2023. But now we know otherwise. So what this defendant did was she groomed him, and she started grooming him just months after he started high school at the age of 14. She manipulated him into believing that he was the only one in her life, that she had left her college boyfriend because she led him to believe that he was special. And this defendant did that to lure him into a false sense of security and comfort with her. And once she lured him in, she was the one who suggested that she and him have sex. And not only did she suggest they have sex, but she quite literally created an environment so that she could have it with him. Now, I know that there are photos that are attached to the defense's response, and they seem to suggest that based on the way that the classroom is set up and the fact that there is this window in this door, that it's not possible that they could have had sex in secret because someone surely would have seen it. Well, I would note that those photos were taken in March of 2025, so that was months after the last known SA incident. So it's entirely possible that in those several months that the classroom was rearranged. But nonetheless, I don't believe that this has any bearing on the dangerousness prong. What bears on dangerousness is that the allegation is that this defendant, SC, actually abused a child in her classroom over and over and over at least 45 times. They had SEX so many times that he was able to describe the marks on the defendant's right butt cheek, on her chest, and then the middle of her back. And again, the defense attaches to its response this arrest card and says, well, the police didn't note any tattoos. And here he says, well, she does have a tattoo. Well, the fact that the police may not have noticed a very small tattoo on the defendant's body doesn't mean she doesn't have the tattoo. And I would note that the victim was in a better position to know whether or not this defendant had a tattoo versus the police who saw her for a brief period of time. And the victim was in a better position because this defendant repeatedly victimized him. And the defendant did that despite the fact that they had apparently almost gotten caught at least one time by another teacher. And the text messages are laid out in the petition, and I am not going to rehash them. I know Your Honor has had the opportunity to review those. But there are text messages dated November 6th of 2023 at 8:45 p.m. on a Monday, and in those text messages, they discuss the fact that a teacher almost walked in on them. This defendant continued to abuse him despite the fact that in the midst of this, apparently the defendant's own neighbor had gotten caught doing the exact same thing she was doing, which was essaying a high school student. And sorry, I know I'm reading fast, I'm just trying to get through these. And there are text messages between the defendant and the victim dated November 4th of 2023. And she talks about how scared she is because she just learned that her neighbor had gotten caught. So she knew what she was doing was wrong, but none of those close calls deterred her. Instead, what she did is she just manipulated him to draw him in even closer. And she just developed a better method and manner of essaying him. And by April of 2024, more than a year into this essay, she had successfully lured this boy into her own home minutes away from the high school on 5 or 6 different occasions during the school year, during the school day. So the fact that the defendant coached on Thursdays doesn't mean that they didn't have sex, because she abused him during school hours, not after school, during the school day. And it was confirmed by police that Thursdays were block days at Downers Grove South. So that corroborates his statement. And again, that explains why this defendant selected Thursdays to be the day that she lured him into her home to essay him. And again, she did this even after one of her neighbors had seen him walking through the defendant's backyard and had confronted the defendant about it. This was even after the defendant's own husband unexpectedly arrived home one Thursday morning. That didn't stop the defendant. All she did was she pushed back her meeting with the victim because she was determined to abuse him that day, even if that meant her husband could possibly return home again and catch her in the act. And this was despite the fact that the defendant's house was filled with photos of her and her husband, engagement gifts devoted to her and her husband, and shoes and other items belonging to her husband, all of which would have exposed the lie that she was peddling, that she was no longer with her husband. But like her classroom, she methodically rearranged things inside her home so that she could conceal her relationship with the victim to her husband, so that her relationship, quote unquote, with the victim could continue unfettered. Your Honor, it's the state's position that she is unbelievably conniving and unbelievably controlling. She ordered him to delete every single text message between the two of them. She ordered him to turn off his location data so that his parents would not know where he was. And she made sure to never be with him out in the open so that she could avoid detection by neighbors or by cameras. And this ability to manipulate him enabled her to perpetrate the essay inside her own home in secret. And perhaps even worse, this defendant asked the victim to memorialize the abuse that happened inside her own home. And when they weren't together, this defendant sent him photos and videos of herself, including one video where she was, I don't want to say that word because I don't want this video to get taken down, but self-pleasuring to him and saying his name. So when she could not physically abuse him, she made sure to inundate him with reminders of herself and what she did. And if that's not bad enough, she directed him to send photos and videos in return. Your Honor, this defendant is a real and present danger because not only did she essay him, she forced him to immortalize the abuse in videos and images in order to satisfy her own sexual urges and desires. But that's not even the full extent of the harm inflicted on him. In order to guarantee complete control over him, this defendant fed him one false narrative after another so that he wouldn't leave her. At first, she told him that she was not with her husband at all. Well, that was obviously a lie. Then she admitted that she was with him, but it was only because her husband had information that could land her in jail, so she had to accept his proposal. Well, I am sure that's a lie. Then she went so far as to claim that her husband was having an affair with her best friend and that he was going to run off to Colorado to be with that friend, which again, I am sure that's a lie. But according to the defendant, she was still going to go through with a sham wedding in Italy and end up with millions of her husband's dollars, and then she and the victim would live happily ever after his high school graduation. That is one of the most preposterous stories ever. But Your Honor, the victim believed it because he was a child, and she had complete and utter control over him. She even discussed with him wanting to have children. She told him that if he couldn't be the father of her children, she would have no choice but to choose a sperm donor because, in her words, it's you or nothing. Your Honor, this defendant quite literally abused him in every conceivable way, physically, mentally, emotionally, and psychologically. And she was able to keep up with this abuse for as long as she did without any detection because she had him completely manipulated. That is dangerous. Now again, this is all addressing the prongs on the Illinois Safety Act to try to detain her before trial. We also believe that the threat is still very real and present. Since she has known him, she has stopped at nothing to control and entice him. Her own bachelorette party didn't stop her. Her own wedding in Italy didn't stop her. And again, there are text messages showing that the defendant was texting with the victim while she was in Italy with her husband. And he said that just days before the defendant's arrest, she had emailed him about a fight that he had been involved in, a fight during which somebody had stolen his phone, which would have contained evidence of the abuse. And on that phone was a screenshot of a map to the defendant's house that was taken just 2 days before the defendant's arrest in this case. So even the possibility of apprehension did not stop this defendant from contacting him. I'm going to cut it off there since we're getting to that 10-minute mark, but make sure to go over to my Facebook, Abby Blabby True Crime and News, because I'm going to upload all 56 pages so you can check them out over there. And again, don't forget, her husband Michael knows all of this and still shows up to court holding her hand.